All right, and welcome, my friends, once again to another episode here of the Red Delta Project podcast and live feed Q&A. I'm your humble host, as always, Matt Schifferle. We are outdoors today. I'm trying out a little bit of some different setups here for the podcast and figuring why don't we get outside, although it is kind of looking like it's going to be raining here in a little bit, so might have to retreat under some of these trees. But I got my pull-ups here. This is my local little playground where I like to work out, and I figure why not just change things up a little bit. I'm always looking for new and exploratory ways to make things not so much always better, but sometimes just different. You never know if trying a new little tip or a trick or something can make a big difference. And sure, most of the time, if you try some new exercise or a new program, most of the time it's going to be like, not really does much for you. But you never know where that next little thing is going to come about, where it's going to be a game changer for you. So join me here. We're out. I'm just shooting this on the phone, my local playground here, and we'll see how this goes. But yeah, welcome to the Q&A. Whatever you're looking for when it comes to questions, diet, exercise, what kind of challenges are you facing that are holding you back in helping you achieve your goals? Leave them down below in the comment section so I can address them. But the big lesson for today's episode that I want you to take away with is that whatever you're looking for to achieve in your diet and exercise habits can also be compromised by the very habits you have. So if you turn to diet and exercise to lose body fat, if you don't go about it the right way, you can actually get fatter. If you lift weights to get stronger and build muscle, that can compromise your strength and your ability to build muscle. So we don't want to go into our habits automatically thinking, just do the work and it'll all pan out. Or the more you put in, the more you get out. Because while there is a correlation between how hard you work and how well your results are, you're definitely also setting yourself up for just basically groping around in the darkness, hoping that your success will come partially through luck. And so when you're going through your habits, it's not the habits that are responsible for your results. You're not going to build muscle because you lift weights. You're not going to be healthier just because you avoid processed foods. You're not going to be leaner just because you do a bunch of cardio. That's the rhetoric in our fitness culture that often steers people awry, even if it works for a short period of time, because that happens to all of us. We do an exercise program, we get results, and we think, oh, it's because of the exercise I did, or because of the program that I followed. When the fact is, no, it's not. You don't get results from your diet and exercise habits. You get results from how well your diet and exercise habits influence the fundamental process that is responsible for your results. How well are you achieving the fundamental objectives that are responsible for your results? So if you're looking to build muscle, what exercises and workout routines are helping you challenge your work capacity of the muscle to stimulate hypertrophy? If you're looking to be healthier, how well does your diet support your nutritional needs as well as satisfying your fundamental appetites? And sure, of course, a lot of the general approaches when it comes to diet and exercise will certainly help you. Eat your fruits and vegetables, drink plenty of water, lift something heavy, basic compound movements. These are the things that tend to help give you the best chance of helping you achieve your fundamental objectives. But when we don't know what those objectives are and we don't know exactly what we're trying to accomplish, like in the gym or with our dietary habits, that's when you can run off the rails and your habits can actually compromise your results. That's when you're doing so much cardio that it's making your appetite spike like crazy and you're just gorging on food all the time. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish in your workouts, that's when you do a lot of exercises that just seemingly are great because they kick your butt, but they're not actually helping you build muscle. I run into this a lot of times where people will say, what do you think of my routine? I'm trying to build muscle. And I'm like, dude, you've got like 4 exercises here. And the way you're going about even those exercises isn't really the best way to go about building muscle. So this is why I wrote my books like Beautiful Strength and Be Fit, Live Free, especially because they spell out this is the objective you need to hit if you want to build muscle or lose weight or be healthier. These are the ways you want to use exercise. You don't want to just assume that doing the work will get you the results, because if you use it in the wrong amount, if you're always exhausting yourself, or if you're basically just following an ideology of like, okay, I do 1,000 push-ups every single day, and you don't actually know what it's trying to accomplish, then you're actually not pursuing success. You're pursuing the fulfillment of the ideology, crossing your fingers and hoping that it just makes success happen for you. So that's why we want to always be focused on what is your objective, and are your habits helping you get closer to that objective? And always assessing, like, okay, is this helping me to challenge my work capacity? Is this helping me to get in a caloric deficit? Or is this helping me to have more nutrient dense foods? If it's helping you do those, then you can have more confidence in the fact that those habits are going to be more effective for you. But if you don't know, well, again, now you're just kind of throwing stuff at a wall and hoping something sticks. And it may be weeks, even months before you step back and be like, yeah, I don't think this is working out so well for me. And then you've just wasted all that time and energy. When instead, knowing the objective you're going after in your workouts and with your diet habits and saying, yeah, this is definitely going to probably put me on the right track. And you can know from day one that what you're doing is more effective rather than just hurry up and see. But that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you answer these sorts of questions. Let's see what we got here. My man, Cristobal, coming on, saying, Matt, always glad to see you. What type of pull-ups are you been doing lately? Close grip, commando, regular, and weighted sort of thing. So generally, what I'm doing is just underhanded grip, almost always, or a neutral grip. I don't really do overhand for several reasons, largely because it's one of those cases where it often is a harder version of an exercise that's not any more productive. So whenever we make something harder to achieve an objective, we're holding ourselves back. And now it is raining, so I'm going to get underneath a tree here. So the underhand grip, I'm not a big fan of, just because of that reason. The other thing too is I had an injury to my my left forearm a while ago, and anything with an overhand grip is compromising my brachioradialis, and that's something I'm staying away from. So pretty much always here or here, and it's either body weight for higher reps, like 12 to 15, or I'm using some extra resistance like bands that I've been using. And that's pretty much about 80 to 90% of my back and bicep training on any given day. I'll supplement it with a little bit of curls, some rows kind of as a finisher. But yeah, pretty much this is the majority of everything I'm doing for my pull chain, back and biceps. So that's kind of what I've been doing for that. Plus, I've been dealing with a lot of joint issues as of late. I've got some sort of systematic thing going on. I'm not exactly sure what is happening with my body. Elbows aren't happy with me these days. My right knee's not so good. So I've been taking it a little bit lighter for the past month or so. I've been doing a lot less training, a lot easier training. Right now, I'm just happy if I am not in pain and not really struggling with a lot of issues. So that's kind of my pull training, but a lot of the other stuff that I've just been doing for the body as a whole. But that's why adaptation is so important. And again, why it's so important to understand what your objectives are. Because yeah, my training has really scaled back. I'm not doing nearly as much volume or nearly as much intensity. Do I worry about that compromising results? Not really, because I know what I'm still trying to do. I'm still achieving the fundamental objectives with this new approach. I just got to kind of work around injuries and issues. So that's one of the big benefits, again, of understanding your fundamental objectives, is that you know what you're trying to do, and it's not a black and white thing. It's not like your workouts are effective if you do a certain amount of work or you push yourself to a certain level. Your workouts are effective based on how much of an objective you can achieve. And you can achieve an objective with a small amount of work. Yeah, could I get the faster results? Could I achieve more by hitting those objectives more? Absolutely. But it's just not going to happen right now. It's not in the cards for me. And this is one of those things that everybody inevitably finds in the course of a long enough training career. There's just going to be times when you're not going to be able to put in that much time and energy. And that's fine. That doesn't mean you're going to totally lose all your gains or anything like that. It just means you're not going to make progress as quickly. You may even fall back a little bit. And you're like, well, I'm not as strong at this technique, or I'm not quite at the peak of this performance. And that's great. Nobody goes 100% of the time. And as you get closer to the peak of your performance, the less you can maintain that over long periods of time. This is why athletes have, periodization plans and peaking for a competition, or people will step on stage and they're like, yeah, I only look like that for a few days out of the entire year. I'm not like that most of the time, because they know that as they get to their absolute top of their ability, they're going to struggle to maintain it, but they don't need to. They only need it for a day or even an afternoon. But for general health and fitness, for average Joes like myself, then it's much more about what is sustainable. What can I maintain? Justin coming on in, saying, I'm training leg raises hanging from a bar, but my grip tends to give up before I finish my work sets. Should I incorporate wrist straps or continue to improve grip strength? Well, it kind of depends on what you're going after, but yeah, continue to just do it. Your grip strength will improve. You can kind of get around it a little bit by finding a neutral grip. The handles that I recommend from Kensui, the Kensui handles that you can put on a pull-up bar that are neutral. Generally, you're going to be stronger on a neutral grip, and you're going to probably have better shoulder and back alignment with those leg raises anyway, because a large part of your ability to effectively work your abs and get your abdominals working harder is to have better control and tension in your back. And a lot of people have an easier time with that with a neutral grip. So if you can find a pull-up bar that's got any kind of neutral grip or even slightly angled, and you can, like I said, use the handles from Kensui that I recommend. I think there's a link in the description to all the equipment that I recommend on my website. They just hook over a pull-up bar, and that's probably going to be a lot easier on your grip, but it's still going to require a strong grip. So it's a good way to kind of step up and progress your grip strength. So it's not holding back your ability to work your abs, but you also don't need to depend on things like wrist straps and everything, which have their place. But generally, when folks are using wrist straps from like hanging positions for body weight, it's just going to keep your grip weaker. I once ran into a guy who was like, oh yeah, you can't possibly work your pull-ups hard enough with your grip strength alone. You have to use wrist wraps. And that's just wrong. You should be able to hang on a bar a lot longer than you can potentially do pull-ups or leg raises for. The grip should be the strong weak link in that. So if you're grabbing onto the bar and you're finding that's the weak link, just keep on it and it will become stronger. And the neutral grip is a good kind of intermediate way to go about it. Lucas, my man, coming on saying thoughts on a 3 times a week full body split. I dedicate for strength and high load, one for higher volume hypertrophy and one for technique and skill work. This is a fantastic approach there, Lucas. Always remember, my friends, that you want to make sure that you are giving yourself time for recovery, and it's not interfering with other activities you might have, like sport, or if you're a martial artist or something like that. But 3 times a week is a sweet spot for a lot of people. And the fact that you're doing something different with each one is wonderful, because it's giving you a little bit of variety. It's giving your nervous system some new things to tackle and address. But more importantly, it's making training more fun. It's giving you something fun to work with. It's not just the same boring slog that you're going through, and you're covering a much wider base for the stimulus you're creating. But you're also still working the same basic muscles and the same tension chains, and you're getting more out of your training. So I think this is a fantastic approach. Just make sure that you are keeping a good workout log with this sort of thing, because when you have that much variety, it's a lot harder to track and manage whether or not things are working for you. So having a workout log that spells out your workouts on what you're doing, and of course you can always change things up by all means. You don't need to be dogmatic about it, but it gives you more structure and more direction and clarity on what you're doing, because when you have that much variety over 3 workouts in a week, it can just kind of get off the rails and cockamamie real fast. So I do recommend getting it down on paper, tracking your performance to at least some degree. I use, my adaptive scoreboard training log that I recommend. It's in all of my books, especially Beautiful Strength. I talk about that. So you're not filling in little tedious boxes every workout, but that's just me. That works best for me, and generally a simple way to go about it. So that way you can spend more attention on your training rather than the log. The log is just there to give you direction and clarity on what you need to do in order to make progress and make sure that's going on and you're not just doing work for work's sake. David saying, how you doing? I'm doing all right, my friend. Do you personally have a limited amount of work in a single workout that you wouldn't surpass? Also, how should I get back to training after several weeks without exercising? Oh, such great questions here, David. So first and foremost, not really. I used to have limits in my mind of like, don't ever work out past an hour, or once you do this much work, you're done. And this is a good general guideline sometimes. But again, we're going after ideology rather than success in that case, where your goal is to do the workout, not to actually get the benefits of working out. Because sometimes, I would have been better off working out for more than an hour. But other times, I would have been better off working out for less than an hour. So we want to make sure you're going after those objectives rather than ideology. So generally, my personal thing is that I go into a workout with whatever time and energy I've got, and then I'm getting whatever I can out of it. How much of an objective can I reach? So in Beautiful Strength, which is basically the layout of my program, these days I do double tap training, so each exercise has 2 good hard work sets for it. But if I feel like I really am good for another one, well then yeah, I'll do another set or so. But at the same time, if I'm doing an exercise and I do even one set, and my joints or my muscles, it's like, oh my gosh, this is totally not happening for me. Dips are not shoulder friendly for me today. I'm like, okay, one set and I'm done. I'm not going to do any more than that. There's that old adage of like, you don't quit when you're tired, you quit when you're done. And that's kind of what I go with. And I know a lot of people will say that sort of idea of like, you keep going even though you're tired. But sometimes that means, no, you don't base how much work you do based on whether you're tired or whether or not you're hitting an objective. You just basically go until you've got the job done. And sometimes you could be like, yeah, I guess I'm done. I'm still feeling pretty good and fresh. Okay, well, you're done anyway. The goal is not to exhaust yourself. The goal is to create a stimulus. And that's the important thing. All right, questions coming in fast and furious. I'll try to get to all of these folks. By the way, if I ever don't see your question, just put it in again, because I have a very small screen I'm working with here, and I may there's a chance I might miss you. So if I don't get to your question, just ask it again, and hopefully I'll see it the second time. But Ben's saying, Matt, what's your opinion on Dr. Mike's PhD? Well, is it a honorary degree and stuff? Mike Isertel, I'm assuming for, you don't have to answer if you prefer. Thanks. No, that's fine. I all good. The thing is, when it comes to expertise, it can be gleaned from a number of sources and stuff. Now, I'm not a big fan of titles and names and stuff like that, because you can have, I've known people with PhDs in nutrition who couldn't tell you the first thing about having a good weight loss diet. Their nutrition is all about protein intake and rhesus monkeys or something like that. So we always want to make sure that we're having some sort of a assessment on the validity of their knowledge and experience and whether or not it can help us. So yeah, it could be a BS, a PhD that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's talking about. And usually you can get a good sense of something from someone's experience. You could have someone who didn't even graduate high school, but if they're like, I've trained 100 Olympians for gold, I'm like, I'm going to listen to that person. A lot of times in our fitness culture, especially, degrees and certifications get a large amount of accreditation and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean the whole picture. I got my training certification and a number of certifications and stuff over the years. I've never once had a single client who ever cared what my certifications were, or the fact that I've got education, collegiate education in nutrition. No one cares. The only thing people care about is, can you help me? Do you have a track record of success for yourself and for other people? And if you've got that, you're good. And if, you've got a ton of PhDs and everything like that, but your track record's not good, or especially if you're citing a lot of things that are just nonsense and pseudoscience, well, then the results there speak for themselves as well. My man Joseph coming on saying, Matt, try dive bomber push-ups. Yep, that's in Beautiful Strength. And a couple of my workouts, I find them very hard. Only got 6 reps. They are very hard for that reason, and could not come back up off the floor on the sixth rep. I usually do pike push-ups, and I got 12 reps. Yeah. So I included dive bombers instead of the pike push-ups, largely for this reason, because they're easier to make harder. And generally, when it comes to building out our physique, which is what beautiful strength is all about, we want things that are easier to make it harder on the muscle, which dive bomber push-ups are generally harder than various pike push-up techniques. Not always, but sometimes. So that's why I include them. Also, bigger ranges of motion and so on. So you just change it. As I explain in the book, what I would do if I were you. Now, 6 is fine. If I had a client who did dive bomber push-ups, and the first couple of times they were getting 5 or 6, I'd be like, yeah, sure, okay. Little more strength focused than hypertrophy, but that certainly doesn't mean they're not going to work for you for the sake of building muscle. You're still good there. But if I were you, I would do dive bombers on a bit of an elevated surface. If I was at Capra, the calisthenics gym here, I'd put you on an elevated 12-inch box. And that'll probably get you in the 8 to 10 range right there. And dive bombers also require a good amount of coordination. So it can also just be your muscles and your nervous system trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And then in a week or two, you'll be able to do 15. I've seen that happen more than several times. So I would regress it slightly by either elevating your hands a bit there, Joseph, or just don't go as low either. That's one of the ways that you can adjust the resistance on dive bomber push-ups mid-set and even mid-rep. So if you're coming down real close to the floor, that's going to be harder. If you're coming with some space, like 6 inches from the floor, that's going to be easier. You can put like a yoga block or a cushion or something underneath you to give you a little bit of that range of motion, quantifiable limiter for the range of motion. And that's going to make it easier and probably well within your wheelhouse. But sounds to me like that's a good exercise for you there, Joseph. I think that's something you can do as far as getting the results that you are after. All right, let's see what other questions we can answer here. Here's a good one here. Chris McFly saying, what's your take on training to failure? Bodybuilder and ultra runner who trains to failure every set. Since many years, never injured, but fatigued many times. Yeah, I bet. Could not train to failure be a fix? Yeah, sure. The thing we want to recognize about failure is several things. First and foremost is that it is rather subjective. It's not always just hitting this wall. It's more a question of failure of what? In my experience of coaching people for nearly a quarter of a century here, a lot of times when people have failure, it's not really the actual failure that they're hitting. It's more of a self-imposed failure, or it's failure of their mind or their focus and their discipline. I personally, from my own training, I can say I can only push myself to failure effectively maybe about 20% of the time, if I'm lucky. Usually it's something else is kind of limited. I'll get close. I'll get pretty close to it, but it's so much of a mental thing. It's so hard on the nervous system to do it to true failure that most of us won't reach failure most of the time anyway. True failure. Second of all is, it is very fatiguing. So you've got to take that into account on what kind of objective you're going after. Sometimes muscular fatigue is a good thing, depending on your objective. If you're trying to challenge muscular endurance or training for the stimulus for hypertrophy, then you want to really fatigue the muscles to a high degree to create that stimulus. But if you are trying to train for strength, skill, proficiency, power, you need to have better recovery for things like, your training and stuff like that. Fatigue is a liability for you. And so you may want to stay further away from it. In my book that I wrote about using bodyweight training for endurance athletes, which actually was endurance, it's bodyweight training for cycling, but it applies just as well for runners and cross-country skiers and stuff. I talk about how it's like, don't go near failure. Like, for heaven's sake, like, you don't want to exhaust yourself in your training because you need that energy and those resources for the sports you're doing, especially for endurance athletes. You need so much energy for that. Fatigue from your strength workouts is a huge liability. So you do that more like in the off season, when you're trying to build up some muscle mass, because I know it's harder to build up and maintain muscle when you're in season for endurance sports. But yeah, for the sake of what is your objective, particularly for athletes, failure is usually more of a liability. More of a liability. So saving a little more in the tank can do you wonders. And that might be what's best for you. I can't answer what's your objective, of course, but it's not always a good or bad thing. But like I said, most of the time we're not really hitting it that much anyway. So push yourself to hit your objective of challenging your work capacity if you're going for hypertrophy. Tense the muscles really hard if you're going for strength, challenging your stamina for muscular endurance. But generally for endurance athletes like yourself, it's more about building strength and muscle most of the time, and more about the muscle in the off season. I know did this a lot with that answer here. Hopefully that gives you some direction to that. Let me know if you need some more clarity on a follow-up down below. David following up himself saying, Matt, follow-up question. How would you get back to strength training, hypertrophy training after several weeks? Oh yeah, without working out due to injury or illness. Thank you very much. So always remember the golden rule in effective training, my friends. You don't work with a program or a diet. You work with whatever you can do. And this is why I'm always saying, like, I'm never going to build a program for someone because they're 40. I'm never going to say, oh, you're a middle-aged housewife living in Wisconsin. You need this diet or workout program. That's not how you build things. You build things based off of what can you do? What can you do? What kind of push-up can you do? You know, and man was talking about dive bomber push-ups. If I see you're struggling with dive bomber push-ups, I'm gonna make the dive bomber push-up easier. If you're coming after illness or injury and you're like, I've lost some strength, I've lost some energy, I've lost some motivation, great, change your program however you need to in order to just do whatever you can do. I'm like, I've only got the energy and juice to work out for 20 minutes, and I'm gonna do these exercises that are stepped down from what I could do. Great, that's what you do. And this isn't just in the long term. This is short term too. As I always tell my clients, I'm like, my job as your coach is to take whatever you bring to me through that door over there and making it work somehow. So if you come in and you're tired, you're exhausted, you're sore, you haven't worked out in several weeks and you're hungover from partying last night, it's my job to take whatever you have for energy and ability and still make it work. I'm going to change your workout somehow. I'm going to make it easier here. I'm going to give you more rest periods. I'm going to cut back on the exercises, whatever, so that we can still hit our objectives. Training for strength, hypertrophy, muscular endurance, whatever. But if you come through the door and you're like, man, I am absolutely on fire today. I feel amazing and I've got all this energy. Well, you better believe I'm going to change your workout program to reflect that too. And you're like, okay, you are just absolutely destroying that exercise. Let's do a harder version now. You always train according to your ability, not according to your age, not according to, some sort of dogmatic formula, not according to what someone says is best. You train according to your ability. If you can do one-arm push-ups while, balancing on a Bosu ball, I'm going to train you like that. If you struggle to get up out of a chair, I'm going to train you like that. I don't care what your age is. I don't care what your gender is. I don't care how tall you are. I don't care whether or not you've been training for your entire life or you're ranked beginner. You train according to your ability. So if you're coming to the workouts and you've been out for a while, then you train accordingly. You do what you can with what you have. If you hang from the pull-up bar and you're like, oh, I used to be able to do 10 pull-ups, now I can only do 5. Well, then you do 5. It's that simple. And you don't get in your head about it. You don't be like, oh, I've got to catch up. Oh, I've got to run and make up for lost time. And no, you don't. You just do what you can with what you got. It's that simple. And it's like, okay, well, I want to make a healthy meal here. I've got rice and hot dogs. Okay. Well, you make it as healthy as you can with rice and hot dogs. You could sit down and be like, oh, I wish I had wild caught salmon from Alaska. Well, do you have wild caught salmon? No. Well, then you're not eating that. Work with what you got. Work with the things you have. And then over time, not only does that ensure you're still on the track to get what you want, but you also have your attention focused on, well, how do I get more of those things? How do I have more strength and more resources that allow me to level up so that way I am working with more? And that's how things seemingly go more in your direction. Joseph Bellows said, Matt, I did walking lunges up a hill at a park yesterday. Yep, I did the lunges video on walking up a hill for 2 sets and 1 set of bodyweight squats, 1 minute a walking sit when I'm at home. Do lunges with my front foot on a 6-inch box. Very good. That's a pretty comprehensive leg workout. But always remember, my friends, that when it comes to the effectiveness of your workout, it's not going to come from the numbers you're hitting. I do 1,000 push-ups. I do 5 push-ups. I do, 1,000,000 squats. I do 15 squats. I do goblet squats. I do lunges. None of this means anything. None of this ensures you whether or not you're going to build muscle or strength or anything. What does is whether or not those things are helping you achieve your objectives. So if a client came to me and they're like, I'm doing 20 goblet squats with a 30-pound kettlebell. Okay, great. Well, is that going to make me bigger and stronger? I'm like, damned if I know. You're doing that thing, but doesn't tell me anything. Like, okay, you want to build muscle. All right. So is that sufficient for challenging your work capacity? Are you getting to the point where you're squatting and those last few squats are really pushing it close to failure? That's what determines on whether or not it's effective, not whether it's 20 reps or 30 pounds or a kettlebell versus dumbbells or squats versus lunges. Whether or not you're achieving the objective or how much you're achieving the objective, that's the thing that determines the effectiveness of the program. And then that gives us the ability to always assess the validity and effectiveness of what we're doing on a case-by-case basis. Because we don't want to just go in and say, okay, this is what I did. I did the workout as it was described in my workout log. But you may have been better off saying, all right, squats weren't really feeling all that great for me on the legs. I feel like I can get my quads better with sissy squats or on a leg press or something. Great. Would that have hit your objective better? And the answer, if it's better, it's almost always obvious. It's like, oh yeah, that would have been much more work for my quads. That would have really allowed me to push my quads a lot harder. Well, then there's your answer. That would have been better. So the objective is always giving us feedback on whether or not our training is effective and doing what we want. And like I said at the beginning of today's episode, whether or not it's too much or too little. Because if you're doing sissy squats and you're like, I'm going to do 1,000 sissy squats. Well, at some point in that, your ability to work your quads and challenge them is compromised just because you're getting tired. So you're like, yeah, okay, my ability to achieve that objective is getting, compromised. It's going downhill. I'm done. Doesn't matter if you're like, yeah, but you got 100 million sissy squats left or you haven't finished the program. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Whether or not you're hitting that objective well, that's what matters. And that's what you want to base your decisions off of. And it's pretty simple and obvious to work with. And if there's question about it, well, then your experience is going to tell you a heck of a lot on what you actually need to be doing. It gives you that feedback, and that feedback is always the thing that is going to guide you much more in the direction you need to go versus anything you're going to see on YouTube or social medias or, some podcaster out there saying, oh, this is the optimal way to work out for gains and everything like that. Whatever is helping you get to that objective on a regular basis is going to be more effective. Usually the advice out there, from Dr. Mike or someone else, you're like, yeah, that's definitely going to help me do that. Well, then it's good advice. And if it's steering you wrong, then it's going to be pretty obvious too. It doesn't matter if 1,000 bazillion people find success with a particular method. If it's pulling you away from the objective you're trying to hit, it's not best for you. In case in point with me, like fasting for me does not work by any stretch of the imagination. Whenever I've implemented like fasting protocols in the past, it's always been pretty bad. My performance goes down. My general immune system gets compromised. My performance in the gym is compromised. The energy I have goes down. Basically, like everything gets worse whenever I've got regular fasting going. Well, there you go. There's your objective. That tells you what I should be doing. That tells me what I need to have for my habits. It's that simple. So let's see if we can get out a little bit more here into a little more outside. I think it's still raining a little bit. Maybe not. Get some more clarity here. There we go. Little change of scenery. I like this mobility kind of thing. Adaptability, folks. See, I've even got this ability to like have it follow me. Yeah, it's kind of fun in this regard, but I gotta keep it close to make sure you can hear me and stuff. Let me get the pull bars in the background. I can just walk around. Come with me. It's a little bit easier too than just always having a camera point. There. All right, folks, what else can I help you with these days? When it comes to trying to figure out what works best for you, it can take some trial and error, and that's great. That's fine. We want certainty a lot of times. We want to know for sure what we're doing, but that leaves us vulnerable to dogmatic ideologies, because something that comes out and says, okay, this is the absolute 100% best way to do something, don't ever question it, don't ever color outside the lines, that gives us the feeling of control in life and lifting, but that also holds us back, because again, now we're not actually going after success, we're going after the adherence to an ideology and assuming that's going to be in our best interest. But the fact is, change is inevitable in life. You're going to be different. I'm going to be different. Days are going to be different. Weather is going to be different. There's always change in life. So whenever our ideologies and our methods are dogmatic and fixed in a changing world, eventually that's not going to work in our best favor sooner or later. It's just the rock in the stream. Eventually, it just gets worn away. So when we are using our plans when it comes to diet and exercise, it's good to have structure as something that gives us some sort of control. But we always want to be open to change and adaptation. You go into a gym and you're doing your workouts and you're like, this exercise isn't really doing it for me these days. My shoulders aren't feeling so good, or I feel like I need more of this type of food in my diet, whatever. Yeah, great, fine, good, change. It was like, yeah, but the experts say I can't do this and can't do that and stuff. It's like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Case in point here, like I'm better off eating ice cream in my diet to some degree. This is something I realized for myself years ago. Maybe it's just caloric fortification. Maybe it just makes sure that I'm getting more general calories into my diet. But I've noticed that if I go several weeks or months and I'm just not having any sort of ice cream in my diet, I just start to lose a step or two. But if I've got ice cream on a regular basis, not a lot. It's not like I'm sitting down and polishing off pints of Ben and Jerry's like I did back when I had, disordered eating habits. But if I've got a little bit of that in my diet to some degree, I look better, feel better, perform better. Like everything's just better if I have some degree of ice cream on a diet. Now, yeah, you could argue against that till the cows come home. You could pull up studies. You can pull up expert opinions. You could say, this is why humans shouldn't eat dairy. This is why sugar is bad, blah, 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 blah. Does it matter? No. You do a thing, you get better results. Boom. That's what matters. That's the end of the story right there. So the trial and error is important, but only if you trust yourself. If you have the resilience and the self-confidence to do what is truly best for you. Because if you're always second guessing yourself, if you're always feeling like I'm not quite sure this is in my wheelhouse, and you keep program hopping and diddy bopping back and forth all over the place, now you're just running around and you lack direction and discipline to do what is best for you. Because I know we crave that certainty, and we crave the feeling like I want to know absolutely for sure what I need to be doing. But that certainty, like control itself, my friends, is an illusion. It is not real. And those who promise it to you are selling the illusion to you, either for their own sake, for the sake of the ideology or in the dogma, or their own power. Or they're just literally trying to sell you, something like a product and service. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I mean, I've got my books and equipment and stuff I like to recommend, getting links down below, shameless plug and all that kind of thing. But does it really matter? No. You could come to me and say, yeah, want to change these things up in your program, great, go for it. If it helps you achieve that objective better, it's better. And then you don't need to second guess it 100 times over on what things. Joseph, following up with that same app, looking to work my legs a little harder. Yes, sissy squats bother my left knee because my left foot will not stay straight. I have a little problem with it staying straight. So you're talking about like your knee tracking forward there, Joseph? That could be a sign of something that needs to be addressed, something that needs to be tackled. Send me a video, reddeltaproject@gmail.com. Let me take a look at your sissy squat. That could be telling something about it. Could be a structural thing. I love sissy squats, but they don't always work for me because I've got that issue with my right foot. So sometimes I try to do it and my foot is like, nope, not today, buddy. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, not today. Your lunges and squats, are you starting to play around, Joseph, with some of the more advanced squatting techniques, hover lunges, shrimp squats, box pistols, that sort of thing? Because especially with calisthenics, you're just going to need to get more onto the single leg stuff eventually. If you're looking for harder, that may be the case. Be sure that you check out later this week. I'm going to be doing a special video on band assisted single leg work, because one of the things that challenges people when it comes to progressive calisthenics training is that when it comes to loading more weight onto a single leg, a lot of people have trouble doing that because they don't have the stability or the mobility to allow themselves to sufficiently challenge their muscles. And so using resistance bands, I've been doing for the past month or two, has really opened the door to making that a lot easier to do. And I'll be making a video on that. But that's what you may need to do here, Joseph, is more of the exercises where almost all of your weight is on a single leg. But I'm curious about those sissy squats. Do please send me a video so I can assess it for you. Justin Schuth, good to see you, my friend. Say, Matt, sets 1, 2, 3, and 10 rep max push-pull squat calisthenics done as circuits with minimal rest when focus is conditioning/work capacity for 20-30 minutes. A worthy template when access to cardio, or is it limited? Very good. I think it's fantastic, especially when conditioning is really what you're looking for here, Justin. If you are looking for muscular work capacity for the sake of hypertrophy, I would slow it down a little bit towards the end as you're getting to like the 9 and the 10 repetitions, so that the cardiovascular aspect of it is less of a limiting factor and you can really challenge the actual capacity of the muscle itself. Like I was saying earlier, failure isn't always failure as we think it is. It's usually failure of something else. And if you're doing like pull-ups and you're really out of breath, chances are that's going to be more of a limiting factor than your actual ability to contract your lats and your biceps. So I would slow it down just a little bit towards the end of it. Or you can do like we were talking about earlier, where you have your workouts during the week and you have different focuses in each workout. So you can have the same workout, push, pull, squat. I'm assuming you're doing, clarify for me, is push, pull, squat each day? So you have a push day, a pull day, and a squat day? Or is that in the same workout? I'm a little confused by that. But if it is the full body workout, which it kind of seems like this is, yeah, now that I think about it, it's probably what you're doing. What I would do is I would have a circuit for like one day where you're really just cranking through and going fast, getting that heart rate up and treating it more like a conditioning circuit. Then in the next workout that you do, you make it heavier and harder and more about strength and pushing yourself closer to failure and giving yourself more time in between the exercises. So it's a little bit less about your conditioning and much more about the strength and hypertrophy. That may be a good way to go about it. So that way you've got a focus and an emphasis on what stimulus you're creating with each workout. So that way you're not letting each focus compromise the other and trying to get it all in the same workout. Getting that shift could do wonders for you. Yeah, and he follows up saying, yeah, full body workouts. Okay, yeah, so that's what I would do is workout one, go fast, light-hearted. I would even put in some explosive work if I were you. I would have, explosive push-ups and jumping squats or jumping lunges and stuff. If it's more about conditioning, make it about power and explosiveness. And then the next workout, make it heavier. Put on a weight vest, do progressive techniques, use the bands or whatever that you can to add resistance. So that way you're focusing more on strength and hypertrophy. And you're going to get more of both over time rather than just kind of lukewarm of one at the expense of the other. So that's what I would do there, my friends. Always adapting, because we don't need to always do things exactly the same way. The old adage does ring true. It's not so much what you do, it's how you do it. So a lot of times the mistake that people make when it comes to their exercises is they do different things, but they do it the same way. So fundamentally, they're creating the same stimulus, which is why sometimes you'll run across this where people will say, "Oh, I've done so many different things, it never works for me," or "I always get the same result." It's like, I know you think you're doing different things, but on the fundamental level, which does determine your results, you're not actually doing anything different. So your body's still getting exposed to the same instructions. So I made that mistake years ago, long time, like almost 30 years ago, where I first started going to a gym. Finally had a decent gym in Vermont that I could go to. And I was like, oh, this place is like a toy chest. I got so many pieces of equipment. And so I was doing bands and cables and free weights and machines and, cable machines and 100 other things that we could use. And my body largely stayed the same, even though I was doing 100 different things. The problem was that fundamentally, I was still doing 3 sets of 10. It didn't matter if I was on a machine or free weights or whatever. I was doing the same movements for 3 sets of 10. So I was still creating the same stimulus, just using different tools to do it. So of course I didn't really get that much out of it. But when you have, for example, your calisthenics exercises or a machine, and you're like, okay, on one workout, I'm going to be going fast and explosive with lighter weight. And then in the next workout, I'm going to do the exact same exercise, but I'm going to go heavier, slower, and lower reps. Good. Now you're creating different stimuli with the same exercise. And that's how you get more broad results. Same thing happens in diet too. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about, fat loss diets. There's lots of different approaches, but fundamentally they're all the same. They're all basically saying, just don't eat the bad foods and only eat the good foods. It doesn't matter what the bad foods are and the good foods are and stuff. It's still fundamentally the same thing. And you're just not agreeing on what the bad foods are and what the good foods are. One side says red meat is bad. The other side says it's great. You should eat it all the time. The other side says that's the case with dairy. The other side says I eat dairy all the time. Doesn't really matter that much, because when you kind of hop from one dietary approach to the other, but it's the same fundamental approach of eat the good foods, don't eat the bad foods, you're still doing the same thing. You may have some degree of difference from one diet to the next, but if it's still stressing body, mind, and lifestyle and you can't stick to it very well, then you just stay on the endless diet cycle, and you can try a million different diets over the course of your lifetime. You're always going to have the same results. That's why here at Red Delta Project, it's never about following a diet. It's always about satisfying your fundamental appetites, and eat whatever you can and whatever you want, whatever you have available, to make sure you're supporting satisfaction of hunger, metabolic support, so you have good energy for your training and everything, nutritional support, so nutrient dense foods, and hedonic support, so that way you don't have any real chronic cravings and food issues where you're laying there in bed and you're like, oh man, I would kill for a cheeseburger right now. If you get those things taken care of, your diet's good. I don't care what kind of dietary approach you follow. And that gives you the freedom to do whatever you want, however you want to do it, but you're still having your objectives met, which ensures it's still effective. And that's what is the most big takeaway when it comes to, like I said, sometimes in fitness, the very things that produce success and results are the very things that can compromise those results when you don't know what that objective is. Like, knowing that objective will give you the feedback of, should you eat more or should you eat less? Do you need more nutrient dense foods, or do you need to loosen up your diet a little bit and just go eat a cheeseburger and fries at Five Guys? Do you need to eat more frequently, or do you need to cut back and eat less frequently? These are the questions that no one can possibly answer for you. There's a lot of opinions out there, granted, But it's recognizing whether or not certain things help you achieve those fundamental objectives. That's the thing that will determine whether or not it's helpful or detrimental in helping you get closer to the target or further away from it. And last but not least, always remember that just because something works for you and gets better results doesn't mean more of that thing will be better. Because hitting objectives is kind of like hitting a target. Back in the day, I used to shoot a lot of archery. So I'd have a little target thing on my big compound bow with the little pin sights. So if my arrows were grouping to the right, I knew I had to move my sight a little bit to the right. So I'd aim a little further to the left and they would bring it closer to the middle. But it wasn't like I was going to say, oh, I moved my sight further to the left. Now I'm getting closer to the bullseye. I should keep moving it more to the left. Of course, that's going to bring it closer to the bullseye, and then it's going to keep moving it further away from the bullseye in the wrong direction. The same exact thing happens with diet and exercise habits. You can cut back on sugar. You can start eating less. You can start eating more. You can do more sets and reps. You can do less. There's 100 different variations that you can practice. And that habit can get you closer to your target. But just because it's getting you closer to target doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to get you closer to the target if you keep doing more and more and more of that thing. Eventually, it pulls you away from that target. But again, if you don't know what that objective is in that target you're trying to achieve, then you don't know you're going past it. You don't know you're off the mark because you don't know what you're trying to hit. You're just shooting arrows blindly and assuming it's like, yeah, sooner or later it hits the bullseye. And even if it does hit the bullseye, even if you are getting the target met, you're doing it largely by luck. And it's probably far more inefficient than you would be otherwise. Where it's like, okay, I was in the gym for 3 hours and I was able to have an effective workout. Yeah, but if you know what you're trying to do, then you're probably going to get it done in 20 minutes. That's my book, Micro Workout, was all about that. It's all about understanding those fundamental objectives. And it never was about making things happen in less time or making things happen faster. It's just the consequence of when you know what you're going after, you don't need to do nearly as much work and effort to hit your objectives. You just do it much more efficient because it's like, yeah, I don't need to waste my time with 100 other things that don't really help me do that. So, all right, I've been yapping off your ears long enough. Thank you, everybody, very much for coming on in. Don't forget down below resources. The new RDP merch is out with the new logos and everything over in the RDP merch store. Links to all that stuff is down below at reddeltaproject.com. And as always, the videos coming out this week are going to be addressing band work for progressive lower body training in calisthenics. And, I've got 100 other things coming out your way. So, thank you very much for coming on in. Best of luck in your workouts this week, everybody. Till then, be fit and live free.